will give the ball to McClendon. He leaps. Oh! He doesn't get in. He fumbled the football. Carolina holds. The game is over. And Carolina has won the game.
With 5 seconds, he's going to throw it. Howard leaps. He has it. Touchdown. Carolina back from the dead to tie the game with 2 seconds to go. There is a flag down, but holy smokes.
2 and 4 in overtime games. Carolina 1 and 3. Here from under center. Give off to Greg Little. Little pulls away. Little is going to score. Carolina wins.
Snap back, spot down. The kick is cleanly away. It is good! And it's with a 54-yard field goal. And how about them Tar Heels? They do it!
Possible win. Snap, spot, kick away, high enough, long enough. It's good! It's good! Carolina has won the game on a 42-yard field goal by freshman Hunter Burns.
In his end zone. The punt, very high. Switzer will have room to return it. He fields it at the 40. Coming near side, Switzer at the 50. Switzer, 45, cuts back at the 40. 35, breaks a tackle at the 30. Still on his feet. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Ryan Switzer for 6. He is doing his best Giovanni Bernard impression. Ryan Switzer again. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys, as always. And tonight, well, we had some interesting comments on the last edition of the podcast. No, not us personally, but our guest, Phil Steele, who was on with us. He had some comments that have some people a little fired up about a couple of different topics, and one that has Josh in particular very fired up. And so we'll get to those comments here in just a moment. We, of course, have to tell you about some of the other stuff that's going to be coming up on the blog side of things as well as the podcast side of things. So it'll be a shorter edition tonight, but a fun one nonetheless. So let's jump in right away here. And, first of all, just overall, your first time talking to Phil. I get to do it every single year, and he's been tremendous. This year, a little shorter than normal. Again, had to kind of fit it into a smaller window this year. But what were your impressions of talking to him and his outlook, on the Tar Heels in general?
It's like talking to a disciple that wrote a book of the Bible, because he writes the college football Bible. We all get his magazine every single year. We pour through it. That's how we get, help make our predictions, help, get ready for the upcoming season. So it was just a lot of fun. And the thing you like about Phil is he's not afraid to give you some opinions and not afraid to give you the insight, because he has a lot of it. So it's why when we got done, I said, look, we gotta post this interview separate, then we got to come back and react to it, because some of the stuff he said was pretty eye-opening, pretty interesting, and I thought it was worth talking about. And it's a great way to get our audience ready for what's going to be a busy week for us, because we'll be back later in the week recapping the Tar Heels Day out at ACC kickoff, and then our position previews get started later in the week as well. So a great way to tee off what's a busy week for us on the pod, with a great reaction to a great interview with Phil Steele.
Yeah, and hopefully Brett Ciancia is somewhere along the way, maybe this week or next week as well. So, yeah, plenty of stuff coming your way here as we are officially in preseason mode with camp starting here at the end of this month. But there were a few things, as I mentioned, that jumped out to us, 3 things in particular. And we'll start with probably the one that maybe didn't jump out to a lot of people that were watching or listening. but it's one that you said to me, okay, we have to discuss this. And really, there's one guy in particular that I think when he talked about NFL draft guys that you were a little surprised by. Now, this question that you asked originally and the start of his response is going to be about Bryson Nesbitt, which makes a lot of sense. He's one of the top tight ends in next year's draft, probably a guy that's going to be selected in day 2, maybe early day 3, if there isn't that run on tight ends that we've seen here in years past. And while he was talking about him, he also brought up another tight end on the roster that he thinks could potentially be headed for the next level.
Yeah, he's an NFL draft pick. I mean, he's 6'5", 235, and he can fly. And he's more like a wide receiver, but he can also block. So he's not just one of those guys that's named a tight end, but is really a big wide receiver. He's a guy that can block. He was a Mackey semifinalist last year, and I think he's going to be a Mackey finalist this year. But they also got John Copenhagen there, another guy that could be drafted, and he's the best blocker of the tight ends. Sort of reminds you a little bit. Remember, Georgia had the more of a receiving tight end, more of a blocking tight end. I think they've got 2 really good tight ends with North Carolina.
Well, I agree with him on that last part. I would honestly say you got 3 because I think Jake Johnson, with the production that he had last year at Texas A&M, if he has to play as well, more than capable, which gives them that 3 tight end group that they have liked for the last couple of years. But for you in particular were kind of surprised by him talking about John Copenhagen being possibly an NFL draft prospect.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the right system, he could maybe be a guy that gets drafted. But the way Phil talked about it was that this was a guy that's going to be drafted in next year's NFL draft. And the only reason why I kind of caught that, why that kind of took me by surprise, is because it comes back to probably the biggest complaint that I've had about Carolina's offenses under Mac Brown is that they haven't been utilized enough. With all the talent that's in the room, we know Bryson Nesbitt, athletic freak, mismatch problem. He's going to get his looks. John Copenhagen, yes, but by being a good blocker could get him drafted. But, you see the tight ends now and the role they have in NFL offenses. If he were to be drafted, I think it'd be because you could utilize him, yes, as a run blocker, yes, as a pass blocker, but also in the passing game. I think it's a good news for Carolina that you have this talent and this depth at that tight end position because you don't know who your quarterback's going to be. And you usually make that connection with the tight ends quicker than you make them with the wide receivers. But, I love what Copenhagen's done. I've pleaded for him to be utilized more often because whenever he's been utilized in the passing game, it's felt like it's been a big play for Carolina at that point in time. But haven't thought of him as an NFL prospect, and I guess that's something we'll have to monitor this season once the mock drafts start rolling out in the middle of October.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for him that I think is going to be different this year than last year is, remember, last year he comes to ACC Media Days, and we're saying, okay, well, that's a little weird. Why would he be the guy that's coming to ACC Media Days? Because we didn't think he would be a guy that would probably start. We knew he was a blocker that, potentially he'd be utilized there. But we were like, okay, Bryson Nesbitt's the big name. I talked to a lot of guys that were out there last year, and they told me, dude, Bryson Nesbitt, no, the staff loves this, or Copenhagen, excuse me. The staff loves this guy. They think he's the best tight end in this room because he can do everything. He can block, he can catch the football, and they expected a breakout year from him. And then remember, I'm pretty sure it was the South Carolina game, or it may have been the Minnesota game. He ends up breaking his hand. And once he breaks his hand, that's it. He had it wrapped. And the thing that's amazing, he still played through that. Remember, he put the club on and he continued to play because he knew that he still had value as a blocker. But, that ends up pretty much taking him out of commission because even once he got the club off his hand, he still had to wear a brace. The hand wasn't right until later in the season. Still caught 18 passes for 234 yards, but more importantly, 4 touchdowns. And that's going to be huge because Carolina loses their all-time leading touchdown receptions guy at the tight end position in Kamari Morales. He entered the transfer portal. And so now you got to find a guy that can be that red zone threat at the tight end position. Clearly, Bryson Nesbitt can be. I've said it for years. Line him up on the outside. He's got the height advantage. Let him go up and get the football. But that doesn't seem like something Carolina wants to do. So you need these guys that can really catch some of those short routes in the flats and run through guys and find the end zone. That's where Copenhagen could shine. And I think this could be the year where it sets up for him to be able to do that. I think there is NFL potential there. It's just, can he stay healthy this year? If he does, I think Phil could certainly be right about that. And the other thing you said that, he was talking about a lot of these different positions. He sees NFL guys. I mean, you look at this roster, there is a good chance that there are going to be a pretty solid amount of NFL draft picks. I mean, we know Amarian Hampton's going to be drafted. Cayman Rucker's in that same boat. I think those guys are automatics, and same thing with Nesbitt. Those three guys, there's no question in my mind they will be selected. Copenhagen's a guy that you can certainly keep an eye on. I think defensively, I mean, who knows, man? Like Des Evans, if he ever breaks out, would have a shot just based on what he was coming out of high school. But that's, you're probably holding your breath on that one. I think Power Eccles, depending on how he looks, has a chance. I think he'd be a late round guy. I don't think he's quite in the same ilk as what we saw from Cedric Gray this past year. I think Elijah Huzzy, especially as a nickel guy, has potential. So there are a lot of guys on this roster that I think, if they have the type of seasons that they did a year ago, or for some of them they build on that, then I think they certainly have an opportunity to go to the NFL. All right, well, we go from the position that is loaded with talent and has three guys to a position that has some talent, also has three guys, but it feels very important for you to get down to one guy, and that is the quarterback position. And look, I'm the guy that's been on here pretty skeptical that Carolina actually had a three-man race at the quarterback position. I said, look, Jacoby Criswell is a guy that's coming in. He's learning a new system. He's going to have to do this now on the fly here in the fall. Well, Phil Steele confirmed to us that even with that, it is a three-quarterback race as we start fall camp.
Yeah, I do think it's a three-man race heading into the fall, no doubt about it. And Coach Brown, that's what he told me, was it's, Max Johnson is a guy that has had over 900 snaps in the SEC, and he can run pretty good, and he's an experienced quarterback. You got Connor Harrell, who's a guy that has 4.4 speed, played in the bowl game naturally. And then the Arkansas transfer, Jacoby Criswell, as well, comes in. He felt he had three older guys that all can play this year. And so I think it's a great situation to be in. They're going to be able to uncover a quarterback in August.
So this pretty much tells me that this is a wide open race. This is confirmation because Mac Brown hasn't spoken to the media since the spring game. So that means they didn't even have Jacoby Criswell at that time. Him telling this to Phil Steele is as much confirmation as we need, because when he speaks to the media, he's going to say the exact same thing. He's going to say this is a three-horse battle. This is why Jacoby came in. He's here to compete. My question to you is, how does this make you feel as a Tar Heel fan? Because three quarterbacks, we've said before, two quarterbacks is enough to try to figure out, especially with how close we feel Max Johnson and Connor Harrell are. Now you're adding a third person into that race.
Yeah, it doesn't make me feel any better because I think the future of the program and the feelings around the program all depend on what this team does this year. And that means if you get the quarterback spot right, you go 7-5, 8-4, and what feels like a transition year. I think Carolina fans will be happy, pleased. We build towards next year. Maybe we could really make a run at finishing in the top three in the ACC. You mismanage this situation. Carolina gets off to a slow start, I think we're probably sitting here the end of October, early November, talking about the final days of Mac Brown's second stint in Chapel Hill. And I think we all want, whenever we have that conversation, to be a positive one. So, look, I thought when Jacoby came in, it was just them adding just a veteran third quarterback to the roster, because that would have made a lot of sense. I never would have thought they were bringing him in to compete for the starting job. But apparently that's where Carolina is right now. And I think the best thing we can hope for is that one of these guys really separates themselves early on in camp, because I don't want to go into that road opener at Minnesota the first night of the season playing two quarterbacks. I just think that's not a recipe for a win. And I think, if Carolina wins week one, I think this could be another good start to them. If they lose week one, you just don't know how this group's going to respond. So, but look, Inside Carolina wrote the article when he transferred in that, looked like it was going to be a 3-quarterback race. We kind of pushed back on it, but they were certainly right. And Mac Brown enters the most pivotal year of his second stint in Chapel Hill with an unknown at quarterback, and that only raises the questions around him as the future leader of our program.
Yeah, I'm concerned. I'm not going to lie to you. This concerns me a lot, because what it makes me think why they went out and got Criswell, if they're wanting him to be a part of this race, is that they did not like what they saw from these two guys in the spring. They do not think that these guys are either for Max Johnson, understanding the playbook. For Connor Harrell, they don't think he's taking enough of a step forward that they need him to if they're going to use him as their starter this year. And that's what makes me think Criswell's in this race. And to me, I'm with you. I want to see separation early. So what sucks is that, and it's the thing is I like Jacoby, man. I thought, I'll be very honest. With that offseason a few years ago, when he was battling Drake, I thought he was going to end up being the starter because of what we had seen, how close it seemed like those guys were exiting the spring, and the fact that he had a little bit of an experience advantage. I thought early on they would maybe roll with him, and then, eventually Drake would take over. Now, Drake, luckily was able to take over the spot, and we had some pretty good success with him. I think Jacoby's got the talent. Problem is that he is not going to separate himself early. I don't see that, because he's a guy that has to come in and learn a completely new offense. And I get it. They've probably given him the playbook. He's had time to study it. It's one thing to study it, to go through player-led practices and, run some of the stuff that they're going to run. It's another thing to actually be in practice with Chip Lindsey calling plays and you having to adjust to what he is having you call. There is, some familiarity with some of the weapons. Some of the other guys he won't have familiarity with, so he'll have to build that. I think there's a lot stacked against him. So I'm with you. I want to see one of the other two guys separate themselves. I've said it all along. I think Connor Harrell's the guy. I really do. I think he is the guy that has the best combination of arm strength, accuracy, and running ability. I think he gives Carolina something on the ground that they really have not had since Marquise Williams was here. But I don't know, man. I think right now, if I had to say, I think there's a legitimate chance that Jacoby Criswell is the guy. And to me, that means that Jacoby Criswell will be one of the guys in the season opener. Because I think if he is in the race all the way until the end, I just don't see those guys separating enough by that time. And you're right. We've seen teams do it before. And I mean, as we've gotten later on, into our football watching lives, it's almost unheard of now. It used to be somewhat commonplace where if you had that close of a battle, you just went into the opener. Now you don't see anybody do that. And there's a good chance that Carolina could go in with at least two, maybe even 3 guys that they're rotating in that first game of the season, which would be a complete disaster to me. So hopefully they can figure it out, but I don't know if I have a lot of confidence. Well, now let's move on to, something that Phil said that could be affected by what we just talked about. So you asked him a question about the opener and, Minnesota being a game that kind of determines the direction of the season. You'll hear at the start of this clip, he pushes back on that, but then he has something that is even more interesting that he kind of drops on us.
Yeah, no matter what happens week 1, I think they're in good shape. I've got them favored over Charlotte, NC Central, James Madison, Duke on the road, Pitt at home, Georgia Tech at home, and at Virginia. So I could see North Carolina open up the season without the hype of the past years. This year, opening up potentially 8-0 heading in.
So 8-0 starting out. Now, look, he is not the first guy to have Carolina favored in every other game except that Minnesota game. And even that one, he may end up having them favored. Everybody will have Carolina favored in all those games. Now, to me, the problem is that Georgia Tech has been a trap the last few years. They're also a pretty good football team this year. And Virginia is a team that Carolina got beat by last year. Now they have to travel up there with a potentially worse team than the group that they had a year ago. He puts 8-0 on the table. And we immediately both looked at each other and said, whoa, boy, Phil is going out there. Now, again, I think it's just him suggesting that it could happen. But, I mean, why do you think that's so surprising to us that he thinks this team could go 8-0?
Well, I mean, you don't have an NFL starting quarterback on your roster. I mean, or not that we know of. Who knows? Maybe one of these 3 guys emerges as an NFL signal caller. Like, if Drake was back, we wouldn't have batted an eye. That'd probably be the expectation. Yep. If Sam Howell was given this schedule, I think, if they win week 1, I think our expectation would be 7-0, 8-0. I don't rule it out of the realm of possibility, because if they get by Minnesota, all these games are very much winnable. And, from a talent perspective, Carolina should win all those games.
Yep.
For as much flack as Mac Brown gets, when his teams fly under the radar, it's typically when he's done his best coaching job, just historically, both at Carolina and then, of course, during his time at Texas. So, but it's why, like, I've been asked a lot about week 1, and I think it's a tone setter. If Carolina wins week 1, I think we could put ourselves in the position to play meaningful ACC games in November, which is something that I think we all want as Carolina fans. I don't think we expect it this year, but I think it's on the table. But it's different when you hear national people say that, because after the failures of the last 2 years, you're not going to get national people saying Carolina can start fast and play important games in November, because nobody believes in them. But Phil Steele, with his research, with his knowledge, with his formulas, he sees a scenario where Carolina could be 8-0 going into that game at Florida State the first weekend in November. And I think as Carolina fans, I think we could all embrace something like that, because it would be a sign of another successful season under Mac Brown.
I mean, look, man, I'm holding back when it comes to this year. I need to see stuff from certain units, especially in the trenches, before I really am buying in that this team is going to be different than the teams that we've had in the last few years. And that at this point, they're even better than a team that's going to, probably go 7-5 or 8-4. But, I mean, yeah, if you're telling me this team starts 8-0, I'm all in. Like, at that point, because if you're getting to 8-0, this defense is much improved. This offensive line is way better than it was a year ago.
And more importantly, you found your answer at quarterback.
Yeah, you found if it's Connor Harrell, you found a guy for a few years. Jacoby Criswell, I think, has 2 years remaining. So you could find a guy for the next couple. Max Johnson, if it's him, he's your guy for the rest of the year. And then that sets up next year where you bring in an extremely talented quarterback from in-state that could be your next 3-year guy that could make it to the NFL level. Whatever the scenario is, I mean, at that rate, yeah, you would be 100% in, because you could say, well, you know, who would you really have beaten? The thing is if they find a way to beat Georgia Tech, I don't care what Georgia Tech's record is when they face them. And by the way, I think Georgia Tech's going to be really good this year. If they win that game, that's massive, because they couldn't beat them when they weren't good. Now they're actually good. That would be a huge win. If they beat Virginia, now that one you shouldn't be ecstatic about, but that would be avoiding a place that has always given them issues, and a team that beat them last year when we thought on paper they were a better team than the team that Carolina is going to field this year. So I don't see it happening. I really don't.
I don't either.
I think somewhere along the way they will lose a game. And to be honest with you, I'm still having trouble seeing them win the opener.
Same here.
I mean, that's the thing. But to me, I mean, yeah, everything is – there is a schedule in front of this team that is easy enough for you to be able to win 8 games again, maybe even 9 if things break the right way for you. But it's about going out there and actually taking it. But you're right. When you hear a national analyst say this, and I mean, look, man, we had Kelly Ford on, and he has all of his percentages as well. And we heard him say basically the same thing, that he's, you know, his most likely record prediction for Carolina, he said it's 8-4, but he could easily see it being 9-3 because he only has Carolina as the dog in 3 of those games. I think that's the sweet spot where a lot of national people are at. And it's weird because every other year, Tar Heel fans are usually ahead of where the national media is at. This year, I feel like a lot of Tar Heel fans are saying, man, that seems crazy to me. So, I mean, who knows? We'll have to wait and see. And I think you're right. Hopefully this is one of those years where the expectations are low for Carolina. But I'm not even going to lie. I filled out my preseason ACC ballot today since we're going to be there. I have Carolina 7th in the conference. Like, I can't put them any higher. I just don't, with all the question marks that you have, I can't put them any higher. So, yeah, even me, I'm more down on this team than in years past, and yet the national media thinks there's a chance they could be good. So maybe this is the year where they surprise some people.
Yeah, and like I think it's important to mention, like if we go 8-4, 9-3, it's okay to celebrate that this year. Last year, 2 years ago, we were right to be disappointed because you were 9-1, you were 6-0. You don't reach double-digit wins. You get blown out in a conference championship game. It's okay to be disappointed with how those 2 seasons fared.
Well, it depends on what it looks like, though, right? If we do what Phil says, if they start 8-0 and then they finish 8-4, okay, then we can be a little angry again.
Yeah, I mean, you can, but like you still put yourself in a position in a transition year to play meaningful games in November. And I find it hard to believe if they're 8-0, they're going to lose 4 straight games. I mean, look, Carolina football is going to Carolina football at some point. I know we say that every year, but I think at that point, it would feel almost like that 2015 year, where that belief in that locker room. I mean, like, yeah, you look back at that 15 season. That team was good. That team had talent. They beat teams because they played harder than them, and they just truly believed they were going to make more winning plays.
Yeah,
like, and everything came together on both sides of the ball. I think if this team gets off to that kind of start, you're looking at that kind of recipe again, where you're getting the most out of every position. You're getting every break you need to get. Your defense is bending, not breaking. You're getting turnovers. So I'd find it hard to see them losing 4 straight games. And so, I think for me, as someone that believes in Mac Brown, I want him to put together a season that makes me still believe he's the right guy to lead the program. And if they go 8-4, 9-3, I think it'll be hard for us to look back on the season in December and say, yeah, there's a more qualified person to do this thing. So it's going to be interesting. But, as someone like you that, in the early parts of the offseason and we got the schedule, didn't really know how to feel about this year. Like if they went 6-6, 7-5, I would have been pleased. But I do think 8-4 and 9-3 is very much on the table for this group. And if that's the case, it should be a fun fall for us at home, us in Keenan, and us on the podcast.
That's right. And guys, we're going to be taking you up to the start of the season where we will then roll through all of that stuff. You know how we do all the in-season stuff. We're still going to be doing that this year. But leading up to the start of the season, I mean, we're going to be hitting it hard. I mean, Josh told you we are going to be back on Thursday night recapping what we see out there at ACC Media Days. I believe both of us are going to be out there.
I'm going to be out there.
Okay. I will be out there as well. I have to host with Walker that day, so I'll be out there as well. We're going to be talking to a bunch of guys. I've already got it confirmed, by the way, that Walker gets Cayman Rucker, which I'm a little disappointed about, but I'll still hopefully be able to ask some questions. And then we will get Power Eccles. So that'll be really cool. We'll get to sit and talk to Power a little bit for about like 8 minutes, stuff like that. So that'll be a cool interview that we'll be able to bring you here exclusively on the podcast. And then we'll recap everything else that is set out there. Again, that is Thursday when Carolina is going to be in attendance. So make sure that you guys are there to check all of that out. And then Sunday night, that's when we're getting into the position previews. And look, we're not going to do it exactly like we have done it on the website. We're going to consolidate the offense. So what we'll do is quarterbacks on Sunday, and then the next editions will be the skill position players on offense, the offensive line, the defensive line, linebackers, and then the secondary. We wanted to, in terms of breaking up the offensive skill positions from the defensive skill positions, look, the defense, we got to break down each unit because there's just so much to say about all those guys. So that's the reason that we're going to go at it that way. Special teams wise, I mean, we may throw something in there at the end of the defensive backs or something like that. I think for the first time in a while, we don't have to be nearly as concerned about special teams as we've been in the past. So that'll certainly help. But yeah, all of that stuff will be coming up here on the podcast side of things. So make sure you check that out. I mentioned Brett Ciencia. In talks with him to try to get him on. I'm going to reach back out to him actually again here to see if I can't get him on sometime towards the end of this week. If not, then he'll be sometime early on next week. And then still going to try to contact a few other people, around the ACC, around college football, to see if I can get them on before the start of the season to help give us sort of that national perspective on the team. Of course, once they go into camp, we'll try to find somebody that's there covering them. Probably going to reach out to one of the guys that I always love to go to this time of year when the team's in camp, Michael Coe, and see if we can't get him back on the podcast to tell us what's going on out there at fall camp. So keep an eye out for that. And then, of course, right before the start of the season, once we get through all that stuff there, we'll still, of course, be giving you the latest from camp. But then we get to the breakout players, as well as our bold predictions for the season. And, of course, those will be articles on the website as well. But you don't want to miss those editions of the podcast where it's us out there. But, yeah, website side of things, guys, we are doing all the position previews right now, rolling through them. Defensive line will be up tomorrow for you guys to check out. That'll be a really interesting one. Pretty much one guy that we are really excited about. A couple other guys that we have, we've seen some promise from. And then some guys that really need to step the hell up because it's been how many years that they've been on campus, and it's time for them to follow through on what they were coming out of high school. So make sure you're keeping an eye out on that. Then we'll do linebackers, defensive backs, and special teams as well on that side of things. So make sure you're reading those articles. That'll give you sort of a perspective on where I stand to a certain extent. It's really more descriptive than it'll be on the podcast side of things, where it'll be, me giving my opinions as well as Josh giving his opinions. So that's where it's a little bit different. So you don't want to miss either of those kind of those things content wise. And again, you can check that out as well as the podcast if you listen to it all on the Heel Tough blog website. Also, basketball side of things, some offers being handed out by Carolina basketball here as we've just gotten through the Peach Jam. So they've seen a lot of these guys. They're handing out some offers. Also, keeping an eye on another guy that Carolina could be potentially trying to add in the 2024 class to add to this year's roster, Julius Halifanoa. He actually reclassified officially. He is now a part of the 2024 class. So we're keeping an eye on that on the website side of things, but also, guys, on the podcast side of things. If something happens with that, we will have you guys updated on the Four Corners podcast. So once again, get in a routine every morning that you wake up for the latest Tar Heel news, the latest Tar Heel opinions, the latest Tar Heel breakdowns. Head over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com, and check it every single day. Also, make sure you subscribe to both podcasts wherever you listen to your podcast, and check out the Heel Tough Blog YouTube channel. That is the best way to get all the live editions, especially if you're someone that's been with us on Twitter during this time. We will not be live streaming on Twitter for the time being. But that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast tonight. Guys, make sure, again, head over to the website, check it out. But for now, I want to thank Josh for hosting with me. I want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.